If you've been playing a lot of Shadowverse under the Heirs of Omen expansion set, then you know that Majeri Bane, the Great Manifest, is absolutely everywhere. Now, when the expansion first came out, we didn't see too much of this card, but as the meta has evolved, people have started to realize that actually this is just a very good card to add into the deck. So why are people adding Jerry into the deck? Well, the main thing is that not only is it just a really decent card on 4, you can just play it and it gives you a nice body, it also gives you a very, very cheap one-cost hard removal spell, which you can use at any point. But if you choose to spend an Evo or Super Evo point, then for those who don't know, what Jerry basically does is then replaces your entire deck with what's called the Majeri Bane deck. And that is essentially a 76 card deck, which is one card, one of every card from the Heirs of Omen set. In addition to that, at the end of your turn, you will basically discard your entire hand, and then it will automatically draw 6 cards from your deck. Now, normally, when you run out of cards, for those who don't know, you would actually lose the game automatically, but Jerry replaces the bottom card with what's called the victory card, which means if you draw through your entire deck, you automatically win. So it doesn't matter if your opponent's got 20 health, you just win. So what Jerry's doing is it's giving decks essentially a alternative win con. Something like Tempo Forest has proven to be very effective with this, because Tempo Forest was always good at keeping up with any deck in the game, but it kind of ran out of steam. And of course, Jerry's, what we've just described, means that you're always generating value every single turn. So it gives you these alternative win conditions. Now, the question is, that's great, BJ, but how do you actually play the Jerry deck? What should I be looking out for? What's the difference between playing the deck well or not? A few of you have asked me for some guidance on this, so I wanted to make this video to kind of provide you with a bit of a guide. So without further ado, if that sounds good, hit that like and subscribe for me, and let's talk about how to Jerry. Okay, so the first thing is, as I said, there are 76 cards in the deck, one of every single card, and there are 2 things that we need to think about when thinking about the game plan. So the first thing is, what are we playing against? Now, if we're playing against like a very slow control deck, then we may want to play for our win con where we basically draw through our entire deck, particularly if we got Jerry off early in the game, like on turn 4 or turn 5. And then in that case, we might actually have the time to play for that win con. So we'll be very much looking for lots and lots of draw cards to try and meet that win con. If we're playing against something like really fast and aggro-y, then we're going to need probably some heal cards in there, probably things like ward to stop all the storm damage coming our way. And if we're playing against, for example, a board heavy deck, like something like mid-range sword, then we're also going to need like lots of damage and kind of AoE and removal, right? So you can see these categories here on the screen. I think that it's quite a nice way of kind of segmenting up the deck, the Jerry deck, and thinking about what do the cards ultimately do and which game plan do they feed into, right? So first of all, like I said, you want to know the deck you're playing against, but the other thing, the real kind of like, I guess, point and the skill of running a Jerry deck is like responding every single turn to the board state. Now, this is super important and kind of unique to Jerry in a sense, because normally, obviously, you'd have your hand and you know next turn you're going to draw 1 additional card to your hand, so you can plan ahead. With Jerry, it's very difficult to plan ahead because you discard your entire hand, and therefore you're going to have a completely new set of cards in hand every turn. And that's why knowing the cards in the deck and knowing these categories that we're talking about today can help your brain to quickly process like what it is you need to do and respond to in that turn so you can make an effective decision. Make sense? Okay, let's jump into the different game plans. So the first thing is the victory condition of drawing through your deck and just winning the game. These are the cards that all enable you to do that. They all allow you to basically draw cards. You don't mind if you overdraw, right? Like, the point is to just cycle through your deck as fast as you can and get that victory card for running out of cards. A couple of standouts in here, things like the Tablet of Tribulations. Once that's on the board, you can use it every single turn at no additional cost to just keep drawing an additional card. Also, want to say a massive shout out to Greatness Ascended here, because Greatness Ascended is particularly good in the Jerry deck, because you know that you only have 1 copy of everything, right? So for those who don't know, Greatness Ascended It basically draws you three cards, but it gives you the three of your play points back. So it only costs one, basically, providing that there's only one of in every single per card in the entire deck, which we know we have. So yeah, in this type of thing, and it's all about trying to fit these cards into your mana as well. Like, for example, say you play something else to remove the board, and you've got 2 player points left. You might play the Castle of Entwining, knowing that obviously you can use it to keep cycling as well. So I quite like these cards. You can usually fit them in with something else. For the most part, they're fairly cheap. And things like Hamlet of Killing, not only does it cycle, but it also can help you with the damage and dealing with the board as well. So if you're going for that win condition, these are the cards that you really want to be looking out for. Okay, now the next up, this is quite a unique win con, but it's one you need to be aware of. Sometimes you don't get to play Jerry till later, right? You might not play it until turn 8, for example, turn 7, turn 8. And that's where you want to be particularly mindful of something like the Raio value game plan. What does that mean? It means that if you draw this guy when you've got 9 player points or more, you can drop him down, and for the rest of the game, every single follower in your deck is going to cost 3 less player points, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty insane way of just completely taking over the board. The value alone from that should allow you to win. So it's a win con in itself. Obviously, with an early Jerry, if you Jerry on turn 4 or 5, you're probably going to draw Raio when you've got like 6 player points and you never even get to play him. So it's one to be very mindful of, particularly if you Jerry a little bit later. But it's definitely a really cool win condition and one to be mindful of. Okay, next up, let's talk about damage. It's a game of Shadowverse, right? Every turn, your opponent's going to have a board, and you're going to need to respond to that. Now, there's lots of different types of damage. There's AoE, there's hard removal, there's things that do, like Bestial Swipe, just 4 damage, right? And so what you need to be obviously aware of every single turn is how much damage do I need to do to the board. You should be trying to clear the opponent's board every single turn. We've really got to protect our leader's health every single turn. So the damage spells are kind of like your first go-to, if you like. So yeah, there's plenty of cards here. Some of these you'll see I have included in some of the other categories as well. But these are all ways of potentially dealing with the board. You've even got some cool things in there like Raging Lightning that can can potentially damage enemy face as well, particularly if they have more health than you. And so yeah, being mindful of which of these damage cards you've got in your hand each turn. That's usually one of the first things I try to establish when I look at my hand. How can I actually deal damage? How can I deal with the board? Because if we don't deal with the board, we're probably just going to lose a few turns later. Next up, we've got Destroy. It's another form of damage, obviously, but these are like things that can do hard removal, right? Now, obviously, things like Congruent of Repose, which just kills something instantly, is really, really cool. But I've also put things like Azudia in here, which, yes, it's damage. It does 6 damage on the turn it comes down, but it's actually reduce the health by 6. So, this can be hard removal in a sense, but because it could deal with things that have barriers on them, for example. And then you've got things like the Ephemeral Demon Prince, which, will do a bit of damage to your own face. So it's quite risky, but it does do 2 instant damage. And you've got even things like Hemika, Air of Repose as well, which can boil lock your opponent, and it can pretty much deal with any single board. If you really want to spend a Super Evo point, it's a kind of good way of destroying and, again, dealing with things like barrier as well. So knowing when you've got something that's hard removal and whether you need it, you don't always need to go down the hard removal. You might just need a little bit of damage. And these are a bit more expensive. So you've got to judge kind of like when it's a good time to use them. Next up, AoE. Are we going up against wide boards? Have we got lots of kind of smaller minions? And these are the cards, obviously, to help deal with it. Now, things like Sincero are a bit harder to pull off, but you can often... It's a lot harder to get like you would in Loot Sword. It's a lot harder to get sort of 4 pieces on Sincero, because obviously you've only got it for 1 turn. So you'd have to think about, like, have you got the combo pieces with it in that turn? Maybe you only get 2 pieces of loot on it, but that will still give you 2 AoE damage. If you Super Evo, it'd be 4 AoE damage. And then, yeah, you've got things from like very small AoEs, like the March of the Brutes, which just deals 2 lots of 2, all the way through to Azure Ifrit, which obviously can be pretty devastating and a really good Super Evo target, where you can kind of do, 12 damage to the board or something crazy like that. So knowing, again, when you're coming up against a wide board, knowing which AoE cards are in hand, really, really good. Things like Blinding Faith as well. If you draw it late in the game, it can also be heal, and it can also be draw as well as AoE. So looking out for those. Now, next category, I've kind of got interesting. I've got like heal and rush. So the cards on the left over here, these are basically heal cards. Obviously, things like the Shining Disenchantment are like a delayed heal. So sometimes if your opponent hasn't got up to much on the board, dropping that is really good, because in a couple of turns, you know that you're going to get the heal off of it. So the ones on the left are more focused purely on how to heal. These are really important against kind of like aggro and beatdown decks. The ones on the right are kind of like rush units, so essentially don't have to spend an Evo or Super Evo on them, and they're going to allow you to deal damage, but they're going to put bodies on the board, right? They're going to enable you to rush. And the ones in the middle kind of do both, right? So if you think about the Devotee Usurpation, this thing can give you a necklace, which means that you can then play that on something to give it rush. Sorry, not necklace. The Congruent of Usurpation can give you, what am I thinking? The Goblet for heal, but the boots for rush. Sorry, I keep getting the loot mixed up. Yeah, so obviously that gives you really good flexibility. Like you might, for 6 play points, you could actually get the Congruent itself to kind of rush something and deal damage, and you get a few points of heal as well. So, and also Supplicant of Disdain, again, it's a rush unit. It can hurt something, but it can heal you at the same time. So again, these knowing like the these cards that can actually heal and keep you in the game essentially is absolutely critical. So these are some really, really important ones. Things like Supplicant of Riposte can give you heal over time, or the Supplicant of Entwining obviously can give you double heal, like heal, which would be heal 4 if you use an evolution point. And Lashenya can obviously give you access to the White Palms, which give you like 1 heal every other turn. So if you get her down early, then you'll get really, really good value from it in the long term. So yeah, again, thinking about, do I need heal? And again, when I need to do damage, have I got rush damage? Because obviously if I do that, I get a body on the board as well. And then ward is really, really important as well, because again, one of the weaknesses of Jerry is, you might get beat down. So knowing what your ward units are and being able to play these to kind of try and slow down your opponent is really, really important. Things like Shield Bash, quite useful, because you could put that essentially give a unit ward and deal 4 damage. So it's kind of getting 2 of these categories for 1, which is excellent. Things like Devotee of Repose, pretty good as well, because the Crest is going to give ward to future units as well. Risky Amalgamation obviously puts down a decent board. And again, Congruent of Entwining and Unkilling, these are just superb cards, right? We've already talked about them in the other categories. They're very flexible. You can use them as wards, you can use them as rushers. So yeah, really, really important cards to be mindful of as well. And then the next thing to think about with Jerry is, do you want to lean into the Crest game? Now, we all know this season that Cresthaven are like a tier 1 deck, right? So it's no secret at this point. And the fun thing with Jerry is you can turn any deck into a Crest deck. So again, you've got to kind of like assess, what turn did I play Jerry on? And am I able to lean into this? If you draw Marwyn fairly early, then the answer is often yes. You can, you might not get 5 crests up for the whole game, but you might get 3 or 4 fairly consistently. So these are all really, really good crests to be able to put down. And obviously you're gonna do a lot of damage and play a little bit of the kind of Cresthaven game plan against your opponent, which is pretty terrifying, to be honest. Obviously, we should be mindful of when we've got lethal, and that means knowing which cards are in hand that can either storm and go face from hand, or can just deal face damage. Like obviously Azure Ifrit, Hair of Disdain. is it's not a storm unit, but it does do face damage, right? Especially with the Super Evo, it can do the 6 damage. And obviously things like Rulnai, obviously if you want a Super Evo, that thing could be doing 8 damage going to face. And the Dogged one, I've kind of put a little question mark because obviously you've got to get quite lucky to get Storm with Dogged one because you're only going to have it in your hand for 1 turn and your opponent would have to Super Evo that turn. So I'm putting that down as a Storm question mark or a Storm maybe. Not quite as reliable as the other 3 here. So again, yeah, be mindful of like when you could potentially push lethal, or just force your opponent to react and kind of change their game plan. Like sometimes you do these, you haven't quite got lethal, but it puts your opponent's health so low that they kind of change their game plan. That can sometimes take the heat off you as well. And the last category that I've kind of got in here is duds. Now you'll notice that some of these cards, like the Dogged one, for example, were in some of the other categories. I think that might be the only one actually. And to be fair, things like the Apostle of Veracity isn't quite a dud because you could potentially use that to buff something on board to do more damage, or you could combine it with something like Dogged one to be able to do, or Galmeo, for example, to get kind of a bigger storm damage. So that one is situationally okay. And some of these other cards can be all right. The Devotee of Disdain, the Winged Lion statue, they can be fine just to kind of put bodies on the board. But I would just say that they're quite it's quite a luxury turn with the Jerry deck if you're able to do that. If you're able to just develop and not lean into one of the other categories that we've already explored in this video, I would say that's quite a luxury turn. So the easiest way to think of it is that in every hand that you get, you're probably going to have some duds. And that'll, again, just help your brain to filter out the nonsense each turn and quickly focus on what do I need? Do I need damage? Do I need wards? Do I need heal? And so, yeah, familiarizing yourself with these as essentially the duds of the Jerry card. And what you'll notice as well is that I've got things like the Runecraft themed cards in here quite heavily. Like, obviously, if you get Institute of Truth early, there is the potential to lean into the Runecraft ability where you change the cost, but then because you discard your hand every turn, it really isn't worth it. So I would seriously just take that entire archetype and treat it as a complete and utter dud when you're playing Jerry. And again, it just makes it easier for you to make the decisions and move on with the game, which is what you need. It's half the skill with Jerry. You've just got to think quickly, make a decision, and move on with the game plan. So the next question really is to think about what do you do with your Evos. Now, sometimes you may have, there's 2 ways of looking at it. You can either play your Evos and your Super Evos quite aggressively in the game with your normal deck, which forces your opponent to replay theirs, and then you play Jerry as your last one, and now you're playing against your opponent where they've got no Evo or Super Evo left, and yeah, you haven't either, but you've got the value of like a full hand every single turn, and you try and win that way. The other way of playing your Evos, obviously, is to play Jerry early, turn 4, turn 5 as your first Evo, and then you've still got 3 points that you can play. And I think what you again need to think about with your Evos, if you're going down the second option there, is, again, with what we've said about responding to the board and what it is you need to do. So are you trying to kind of like rush your opponent down? Maybe you've got like the Crest game plan, if you've got Marwyn early, so therefore you want to use your Evos where it gives you an extra Crest, and play your Evos for that. Similarly, if you kind of trying to kind of beat your opponent down, then you might actually want to save 1 or 2 for kind of like when you keep a body on the board or when you get storm units in hand like Rulnai, so that you can you can kind of like finish your opponent off. And similar thing with Super Evos, right? Like do you need a big kind of damage turn, maybe an AoE or something like Sincero to clear the board, or something like Azurif, right, where you can actually clear the board and obviously do damage to face. So again, your Evos will kind of depend on which game plan, which game plan and which approach that we've talked about are you actually trying to pursue. So that is everything, guys, for how to play Jerry. I hope that was helpful. If you found it good, then let me know in the comments. Maybe hit that thumbs up. As I say, I think Jerry's quite a cool card. It's really flexible. If you're a free-to-play player, then in many ways, this should be like the first set of cards you craft from set 3 because it enables you to basically play in any deck. It's a neutral card, and it unlocks every single card in the set. So it's almost like a cheat or a cheap hack way of playing with all of the new cards as well. I personally think it's pretty good. I do hope it's not going to completely take over and we're just going to see Jerry in every single deck, because that would kind of make it lose a little bit of its charm for me. But, you know, personally, I think it's a really interestingly designed card. It doesn't seem too OP, and it's enabling some other archetypes, like we mentioned with the Tempo Forest, to actually survive and compete in the, you know, spell boost meta, the combo roach meta, the loot sword meta, etc. So yeah, a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys in the next one. Ciao for now.